So here we go. Okay, so I'm Carrie Lake, and I've put together this podcast called Animals of a New Earth for the purpose of bringing new and high consciousness perspective to the relationship between humanity and the animal kingdom, and to really illuminate that the animal kingdom is here in large part to assist humanity to open our hearts. There's so many different ways to look at that, and there's so many different ways to draw it out and make associations, but ultimately this is the profound service that the existence of the animal kingdom is a reminder of here's what it's like to live with an open heart. So that's what's behind me wanting to connect with beautiful people like Holli Shan, who's here with us. And Holly does animal communication work through her business called Compassion Speaks. And you'll be able to see her link as well in the text section. So Holly, thank you so much. To me, well, is there anything you'd like to say to expand on your introduction?
Let's see. Like I said, just I don't think there's anything too much more to expand on. It's just, it was, it's really just my mission, and the bigger calling to really close that gap of communication, because there is, I don't think there's a reason why we can't live, harmoniously, with each other, just, animals and people alike. So, and it's my job to help bridge that gap, of that understanding. And it's not as difficult, I think, as people make it to be, and it's not as complicated, I think it's a lot of people, make it out to be. So, and I was just realizing here that the sound wasn't coming through my my earbuds. It was just through the regular computer. So that's why I took them off. So that wasn't the plug I thought it was in my machine.
That's awesome. Okay, so this is so great. I love everything you just said is so perfect to me. The simplicity, right? And that we do have an opportunity to live in harmony with the animal kingdom. I could talk about that for about 1,200 days. So tell me, why do you see that? Like that we can live in harmony. Tell me what you see that makes you say that.
Because it's been done. We used to do it. It used to be done. If you look at, a lot of the, Native American tribes, they still worked in harmony, with the animal kingdom. And specifically, I can remember going to a communicating with wildlife retreat out in Driggs at the Earth Fire Institute, and Penelope Smith was holding that retreat there. And we got to sit there and commune with the bears, and I just fell in love with this one black bear. And and in the meditation with the black bears, I could see, way back when there was a time when there was this unity, when everybody worked together. It's like you could, everybody understood each other, and there was still that harmony and just working together. So it has happened. And I think also in today's world, it still is happening, but in a different way. And I feel like we could use more of it when we can get a lot of the schlock and misunderstanding out of the way.
I love that too, because that's all it really is. It's misunderstanding, isn't it? Misinterpretation.
Sure.
And what I see is it's misinterpretation of who we are, right?
Yep.
It's not a misinterpretation. There's misinterpretation about what animals are, who animals are, what they're here for.
Right.
That they're more valuable chopped up into parts than they are as a whole being. That's all an economic conversation. But what I see, and I'm glad that you said this, is that that harmony that humanity used to experience with the animal kingdom, it still exists. It actually exists with availability at an even higher level of awareness than before. And that's only because of the evolution of humans at this point, that more of us are aware the way that you're talking about, right? Like, we are a little bit more tuned into compassion, and that gives us a different access.
Mm-hmm. It's like when Nancy Windhart talks about how our intuitive sense, the ability to communicate intuitively with animals
Yeah.
is our birthright. It's a natural born thing. And like I've told people, and I talk about this too, is that we're born with this, and kids are a natural at it. They just do it, and then somewhere along the line, somewhere society says that's not possible,
Mhm.
and then it takes time, and so it gets shut down, it gets hidden, and then later on we rediscover that, oh shoot, you know what, that is there and that is possible. Now some people will say, you know what, forget you society, I know this is here and I know I can do this, so you go over there, eat a cookie, and
I love cookies.
and for those people, fantastic, great, I'm so glad that they've never lost it and they've always been in touch with it. And
Mhm.
then you have, of course, the people that rediscover it and say, you know what, this is real after all.
Mm.
That thing that you thought and dreamed of being possible is.
Mhm.
So, and once we can get in touch with that, and then you realize, oh, hey, wait a second, the animals are communicating that way too. I understand now.
Yeah, I love
So,
it. It's yeah, we get taught to doubt what we know because especially when we're little, we can't articulate what we know. We don't have the cognition yet. We don't have the vocabulary, but the
hmm
feel is all there. And
hmm
what I love sharing with people is even the suggestion that it's possible to function on a foundation of sense and feel, to actually feel without fear, or even if you're feeling fear, you feel fear without fearing your fear.
hmm
It becomes a
it
conversation.
just is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a conversation of information through your senses, and it's just a different system. And I think this is something that it's confusing for people who think, oh, if I knew that my whole life, how come I don't know it now? Or people who will say, like, how do I know it's not just my imagination? What I always say to them is, for one thing, it has been with you your whole life. You were just conditioned, and your attention was taken to operate with a certain linear logical system that was reproducible in society and provable in society. But that intuitive system is still very alive. It takes a little recalibration to recognize intuitive information sometimes in that context. And
Yeah, and I feel like that you have to strike a balance with that, right? It's like I tell people all the time, it's okay to be skeptical and it's okay to question. Just don't be so far on the one end about it that you won't accept anything that comes from the more ethereal, the more, intuitive place.
let me ask
So,
you about this, because it's another little point of discernment that I love to bring to people is this idea of balance, striking a balance. Tell me what you mean by that, and because I want to hear what you mean by that.
sure, and it's funny because a lot of people think of balance as as even.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's like 50% here and 50% here. But what I've come to feel that balance is something that you're able to achieve and not have a feeling of overwhelm. So your you can still do all the things that you do, but do them in such a way that it doesn't make you crazy. So so I feel like
Cute.
so I feel like balance is something that is personal.
Mm-hmm.
So what is balanced for me may not necessarily be balanced for you, and may not be balanced for something else. I mean, there could be that. Okay, people talk about the work-life balance, right? So you have the work, and that could be a big stressor, or it could be a big point of joy, and then you have your play, and the play should be something that that rejuvenates you, so that you can go back to work and and do it well, and not be as drained or depleted as you were. So I feel like having balance means that you can still do one thing and another and not be completely and utterly drained and sacked,
Totally
if
get
that
it.
makes
That's cool. So I love this because when when there is the communication with the animals, when there's communication through the heart, all of that happens. It's not about getting a correct answer. It's about feeling what's true, right? And I
Right.
love the conversation about the word balance for exactly this reason. Because, you know, when I ask you what balance is to you, it ends up that it's a feeling, right?
Yep.
It's not a definition. It's a feeling. And to me, what the words you used to describe balance, in my world, you're describing harmony.
Okay. Yeah.
The word harmony. But see, this is I love bringing this up because it's a profound distinction between that logical linear system of get the word right and the intuitive system of wait, which word best describes how it feels to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the connection through the heart. And I want to talk about this. I really want to, maybe next we'll hear about how you knew that you wanted to continue to help animals and presumably people, right?
Right.
Uh, Compassionate communication. But this idea of letting things be in motion, work, life, relationship with self, um, patterns, money, managing animals, all managing myself, all that stuff, letting it all be in motion is what actually lets us be available for intuitive clarity. When if instead we're going down the logical linear path, that's more about get it right, have control, be predictable, and make sure you don't make other people too uncomfortable, right? Sharing even compassionate information from the heart can generate discomfort, but sometimes but it's a discomfort that also comes with love. Do you also find that?
Yeah. Because because when you share something from, from the heart, when you're doing something, with compassion, with love, you have to do it, authentically, and it's got, and it needs to be the truth. And there, I mean, granted, yes, there is a finesse, there is a way to, to say it without completely and utterly, hurting the person that you're translating to, and so that's part of that compassion, that's part of the care,
Mm.
that you need to do when you are relaying information, when you're um when you're communicating that. Because if you just, I mean, there are people who can be great communicators, but they're just all balls to the wall, they're all just plain no finesse, no care or consideration for the feelings, of someone else. And I feel like that with the compassion, you need to be aware of that.
Mm.
You need to be mindful of that. And yeah, and I feel like there is that push to be, to be linear. And what a lot of things I think that's coming up now, especially when you have an entrepreneurial journey or any kind of, journey where you're digging deep into the self and deep into, your spirit, you realize that this is not a linear quest. You can't go, okay, you can't go A to B to C to D, and then eventually I'll just get this over here. And the journey is a much more, is a bigger labyrinth. It's a much more, it is much more of a flow. And people, I feel like they kind of try to stop the flow or go against the flow or do something different, and they need to flow within themselves and within the spirit of what they're doing,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, sure, of course it does. And I think it bumps right up on that edge of discomforts for
Yep.
people, because I can hear the collective mental egoic levels saying, oh, how do you do that? I'm not good at that. Oh, sure, that's so easy to talk about, but blah, 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 blah. And that is a collective, what's the word? That's a collective argument that people tap into as if insecurity is the norm, as if being insecure with yourself is, the default. And I'd actually just had another conversation this morning with another amazingly beautiful woman who does communication work in her own unique way. And she was expressing some sense of insecurity about a request that just came in. And in our back and forth conversation, it was profoundly compassionate, because we just looked at, okay, what does your insecurity want from you? If you listen to your insecurity with the same compassion that you would listen to a horse or a dog or your best friend sitting across the table having a bad day, right? It's the same feeling, isn't it? It's just from within to within. And that's the place that can cultivate that compassion that you're talking about for others.
Absolutely. And I call that, I call that doing your shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
The shadow, the way I see it is that entity, that being within ourselves that keeps us safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the thing that, that wants to keep us comfortable. And generally things might have happened during our childhood that wrote that into our law that, prevents us from doing things. And so, I worked on this meditation, this working really to go inward and to have that compassionate conversation, where to sit, because people talk about, I've conquered my dweller, I've conquered my shadow. No, your shadow is the integral part of yourself. Is that how you're talking about yourself?
Right.
You've conquered a part of you. How about let's change the narrative on it, and let's talk about facing it with honor, with compassion, with respect, and have a conversation over a cup of tea. Just sit and have that conversation and say, okay, show me what I need to learn. Show me what you have, and face it not with fear, although you can be a little apprehensive about it, but you face it with that sense, with that even place, and say, okay, show me, let me learn. Sorry, this is what. Thank you, Rocky. Rocky. Thank you, buddy.
Keeping the neighborhood safe.
Oh, he's keeping the whole neighborhood safe. He'd go after, he'd take down a deer if we let him. He would run up a tree if we let him go get a squirrel. And he's got this really neat relationship with bunnies. If they sit there and they go, ha ha, and he's like, but I want you. And they're going, ha ha, I'm just going to eat my grass right here. Good thing we have a fence. So, Rocky, mommy's on the phone. Rocky. So I'm sorry. I really should have done this from a different room.
No, he's actually, his voice is not loud on this side of it.
Okay, yeah. He's got his low growl, so he's not ballistic, which, believe me, you would hear it if he was ballistic. Yeah. So you can edit all that, right?
No, we're just gonna leave it all in. It's all good.
Okay.
This is why I wanted to do the podcast this way and just let it be real.
Yeah.
I don't want to create some facade that I am the professional and my clients don't have this ability. I think those of us that are at a certain level of accomplishment and relationship with ourselves, it's I get to see, even for myself, more and more what it means to be gifted. And to me, it means having gifts to share. Right?
Absolutely. Because I feel like when you're at a point when you have this, then I feel like it's a responsibility to share. Because I feel like, okay, if you're not going to share it, then why bother teaching? Almost why bother? I mean, I don't know if that's a daft question to ask.
It's a bit of a human twist on the energy of the freedom to share, because humans have these opinions about ourselves of, what's my purpose and what am I here for and how do I earn my keep and responsibility and there's lots of ways to noodle that out and talk about it, like responsibility is the ability to respond, and that's all good. But ultimately, what made sense to me when I was a kid, like 11 and 12, where National Geographic was God, kind of, that, because I would tune into the animals and the cultures that were being shown on the screen, and I'd be like, tell me about yourself, show me everything about you. How does this feel? How does a cheetah feel? How does the gazelle feel? And what made sense to me, the way the logic came together, is that nature doesn't endow individuals with gifts for them to keep gifts to themselves. Right? And another way I've seen it written is, the tree does not eat its own fruit.
Right.
So so why would nature give all these resources to one individual if for her to keep it to herself?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very generative way to look at it, from a heartful, intuitive perspective. And I just love to bring that forward because it feels different. And tell me how if you feel the difference, but it feels different than saying it's my responsibility because I have this. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible to share it with the world. And it matters to me that the subtlety of difference, because the subtlety of difference touches a different aspect of what's true. It touches the
Right.
heart in a different way.
Right. I feel like, so, so we have this gift for whatever it happens to be. And
Yeah.
I feel like there's two ways you can do it. I think the one is, serving people, serving your clientele. So like if you're in a healer capacity, you can serve them. And so they're serving them, and I feel there's also teaching and sharing it and sharing with other people. And I know there are some people who will serve and not really want to teach,
Mm.
which I suppose you've got that two prong thing. But my thought is that if you have a gift, share it, to serve people too,
Mm-hmm.
which is also why I'm doing the grief counseling.
Mm-hmm.
You can share that, but also share that to serve. But in my mind, it's also sharing to teach, to show other people you are empowered to do this. You can do
So
this
good.
too. So
Yeah.
that's my take on it. It's like, yeah, you can serve and do it, and in the doing you can also teach and share.
I love it. I so appreciate that. And for exactly that reason, it's not about being better than I'm the teacher and you're not.
Mm-hmm.
It is really truly teaching is about showing people where it already exists within them and
Mm-hmm.
providing them the tools and empowerment to bring their awareness to their own ability so that their ability can expand. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
ability expands simply by bringing your awareness to it. That's how
Absolutely.
nature works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the beauty of human consciousness. Our awareness is this greatest generative creative force. Take your awareness to something, it expands. And
Mm-hmm.
so with that, then let's go back to the critters and the relationship between animals and human hearts. I think for a lot of people, it's obvious, that the animal kingdom opens our hearts. They open humans' hearts. And for other people, that's not so obvious. So tell me what that's like from your view, your lens, the difference between people that the love is obvious and people that it's not so obvious.
So it's funny because for me, when I was little, I always, took into account, how animals felt and their own agency and their feelings and things like that. And I always knew that they were full spectrum emotional beings.
Mm-hmm.
I always knew that. And it always, you know, amazed me that other people didn't feel the same way and didn't see it.
Like,
And right, and as I've grown, and as I've become an adult, and have, and I've had, have had and do have, animals in my life, I'll tell people that, it's never just when the people say, oh, it's just a dog. No, it's never just and I will tell people, I said, yeah, anybody who tells me, oh, it's just a dog, or oh, it's just I said, a bottle's going to get broken and someone's going to get cut, because that's just how passionate I am about it. And
so watch
it's a little
your
mean,
mind,
but
right?
it's a little mean, but that's where I am. And I've seen more, as I've been going through this, I've seen more people who are willing to stop and be open to the fact of, of animals, being their own emotional, sentient, self-aware beings, and them, honoring that. And there are still the people who just don't. And so for them, I just look at them and go, oh, okay. And for some people, you can change their perspective, or they are willing to change their perspective.
Mm.
And then there are some people who just are not, And I just have to be at peace that, okay, there are those people who don't, but I know who I am, I know what I do, and I know, the truth of the animals that are, with me and around me. And also I have plenty of people who are like me too, who, who feel the same way. And so we are the advocates for them.
So the people that don't feel the sovereignty and the purity and the presence of animals, and they would say, oh, you're full of beans, it's just a cow. Are they telling the truth?
For their perspective, because I think that's what they've been indoctrinated into. So I'll give you a great example. So my mother, my mother knows, I've been in this for a while, and, she's from that time where, essentially dogs and cats and animals are property. And she called me one time and she was very surprised and said, because her friend's dog was on Prozac, I think for being depressed. And she called me and she said, well, can a dog get depressed? And I said, yeah, they can, just like we do. And she was just floored that a dog could be depressed, that a dog had that ability to be depressed. And so it doesn't matter how many times I've told her that, that dogs are thinking, feeling, emotional beings with their own opinions about the world around them. It still hasn't quite sunk in, or, I don't think she's really taken that to heart. So some people are amazed all the time and they never cease to be amazed. I think there's different levels of that. So, I can't change people. I can only share with them my perspective and hope that I can offer a perspective shift, from their point of view. But it's one of those things that they need to experience it and really experience it and not try to explain it away as something else.
Absolutely. That's the only way the expansion happens, isn't it? When people are willing to have their own experience with perhaps a different explanation. I think not everybody is touched like, by the animal kingdom. Many are, and many, I think, would say they felt touched even if there's no other humans around. And sometimes that's a lot easier. But everybody is touched. And again, this is one of the things that is valuable to me in bringing this whole conversation forward, is that every single person on the planet has a relationship with animals, whether they're pets or sporting goods, or even if all somebody ever does in relation to animals is eat them. It's a very intimate relationship with animals. And that's, to me, it's valuable to bring that conversation forward to help reorient people to relationships. And relationships with life, so that life can perpetuate life rather than looking to an economy to perpetuate life. Economy is great, but it doesn't perpetuate life. It perpetuates itself. And I could go on, that's tangent. That's a different conversation. But I wanted to ask you, coming off of that, the last bit that you shared, if animals are sentient feeling beings with their own opinion and their own view of life, what is the difference between animal consciousness and human consciousness that you see?
Oh, wow. I think
take your time. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, so
it's it's a real metaphysical thing, because I feel like with consciousness, it feels like there's different layers and different levels to it. So on the one level, just on like our basic consciousness with what we think about and how we feel about things, I feel like humans are a lot more complicated. We tend to complicate things more so than what the animals do.
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I feel like that's like the ground level of the consciousness. And then when you go, I think, to upper levels where you kind of go past that, I guess you could say the ego sense, that sense of self that humans have that complicates things. Then I think once we start going up, ethereally, more spiritually, more into the collective kind of thing, I feel like that's when that's when the greater harmony is. That's when the greater connection is. That's when the greater dance is. That's where the handshake is, the holding on, the reaching out and yes and working together, kind of the spiral kind of thing. So that's the way I feel it is. Because when we're when we go into or at least when I go into a meditative state, and just and have that that connection with what's with what's greater, then you can still, it's spirit connecting to spirit without any complication, without any trappings of but.
Exactly, right? And I love it. And I love how you're describing it, that so I might change the words a little, so tell me if this describes what you're talking about, okay? But what I hear you talking about is there's a band of frequency, a band of consciousness through which the egoic awareness travels, right? And there's space effectively beneath it and above it. And it beneath and above would be like lower frequency, higher frequency. No different than, red is a different frequency than fuchsia, right? They're just different frequencies. Not one is better than the other. They're just different. And so humans have this amazing ability to move all through the spectrum. And one way that I like to describe it is humans have the ability to go against their nature. And the animal kingdom has a different consciousness than that.
Right. Yeah.
They don't have a consciousness that would say, oh my God, she thinks that my butt looks fat. I better go hide under the bed.
Right.
They don't have that self reprisal ability, that ability to go against their heart. And if we let it be that simple, it starts to get easier to experience the absence of judgment, because going against ourselves is that judgment part that says, oh, something should be better than it is, something could be better than it is. And
I'm going to actually challenge a little bit on that, just because it just, especially just around the word judgment, because I truly feel we can stand and listen without judgment.
Absolutely.
We can create a safe space, and we can be without judgment. I think we are more prone to judgment because of our environment, because of the things that say, oh, it's not this, if it's not this, therefore it must be this. Yes. And so I think there's still that part of us that will do that, but I don't think it's our true nature to be judgmental. I think it's there. I think the judgmental works off of the insecurity that then gets played on by other outside influences. So I think when you come into the true nature of us, as beings, I think it's absolutely possible to be non-judgmental.
Thank you so much for articulating that. And that's my point exactly. That through the connection with the animal kingdom, we can know that part of ourselves, because that capacity to judge is relatively contained within that band of frequency that is operated by the ego mind that says, oh my God, is it good enough? Am I good enough? What if I'm not? And when we transcend that, or when we venture beyond that band of suggestion, that's when what I see is humans can be in the place that is common to all the rest of life, right? So will you talk then about what it's like when you connect on this communication level and how is it different having compassion for animals than it is having compassion for people?
Uh, it's different now.
What do you mean?
When it used to, because it used to be that very much I would say, oh well, I hate people. That's why I work with animals, because I much prefer animals. They're always honest.
Yeah.
And what I've learned, during the course of this journey is that, you have to have compassion for people. So I've learned that even though I might have my preference in my compassion and the connection with the animals, because that's all there. That's a really natural thing for me to do.
Yeah.
For people, it's different. It seems to be a little bit, I don't even have the right word for it. It's I can still have compassion for people when they're with their pets and they are willing to work with them.
Mm.
If they're not, it is harder for me to be compassionate,
Mm. Mhm.
um, if they don't want to listen.
Mhm.
So if the person is willing to listen, then and at least have a conversation, then it's easier to be compassionate for them. In terms of being compassionate for people as a whole, that's a little bit harder for me, because I have a hard time with the injustice and the cruelties that people tend to do to each other, as well as to animals, and animals don't do that to each other.
Yeah.
And people can say, oh, well, what about the cat who just likes to torture that mouse over there? Well, you know what? That's a barn cat. That's what they do. That's their nature to do it. And I can't, that's not for me to interfere with. Do I have compassion for the mouse? Sure.
Mm. Thank
You
you
know,
so much. Thank you so much for your openness and honesty about that. It's so important to me to talk about that and just put it out there, because I think the vast majority of people have a hard time feeling compassionate for other humans.
yep,
And and yet the animal kingdom shows up with no judgment,
yep,
right? And they're like, "Oh, you're being human. I love you. I don't know why you're doing that, but I love you." And it's profound to be among animals and even entertain that that place of no judgment is what's common between us. But then it's so beautiful, and thank you again, it's so beautiful to acknowledge, well, in my humanness I still have judgment, it's still hard,
oh,
you know
sure.
and but it's so kind to admit that. it's
Hmm.
it's kind to everybody to admit that.
And it even goes to a deeper level, because crap, sorry,
That's
um, since I've been on the should have put my phone on do not disturb. Sorry.
that's
Um,
right.
so since I've been on this journey especially with the pet loss grief counseling and
Yeah.
becoming a pet loss grief counselor, there's even a greater, that greater sense, of compassion for the person who is grieving.
Hmm.
So your heart has to go out and be open and hold a very sacred space and a safe space of non-judgment. So in doing that and doing this journey, so I feel like I've softened a little bit more and have had a little bit more compassion for some people. So I try not to knee-jerk reaction, because I'm human, I've got those things too. And if I do knee-jerk reaction, then I'll take that breath and go, okay, I have a knee-jerk reaction. What else is going on here? And I
Mm.
think that takes a lot of self-awareness for other people
Yeah.
to do, to not knee-jerk reaction so much. And that's a whole other tangent talk in and of itself, of knee-jerk reaction to things like,
Of course.
um, yeah.
So then, how opening our hearts to listening to the animals differently or more, or exploring what it might be to be a human without judgment, it's a tender journey, right? So
Hmm.
will you share a little bit about, like, why you kept going forward with it when it is difficult, and how did the animals and connecting with the animals' hearts assist you specifically, to continue to open your heart to other humans?
Wow. It's a really deeper kind of journey, because when I first started wanting to communicate with animals, I just wanted to communicate with my own dogs. I knew they were looking at me, and I knew they were saying something, and I didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
So I learned, and through learning with them, and also having my own grief experience with them, I learned a lot from my animals who had passed. Um, like one of my dogs, Duchess, after she had passed, I had a dream. We kept her ashes on the mantle, and she came to me in a dream, and she led me to a box and opened up the box, and the box was empty. So my lesson from her was that I'm not in that box. So I'm like, okay, honey. And then and then later on, when I was still, when I was an assistant instructor at Equisage, teaching massage, because that was my first profession, if you will, with animals, was doing massage. And I witnessed a horse pass due to colic, and that was the first time I had ever witnessed that. And just like those few moments were just really just playing over in my head, and I felt this presence, the horse's head just over my shoulder saying, please don't remember me like that. That's not how I lived. And I was like, okay, honey, I'm just crying and saying, okay, honey, I'm going to work on doing better. So those moments of working with them, both in life and even after, and being, and having the grief experience, like, okay, I've gone through this, and I know how bad this hurts. And I also know how much society does not put a value on when an animal passes, who has become a family member. And so through that, and wanting just to learn to be a better counselor to people, because I think at some point that was when I realized that, oh, okay, yeah, other people like me need me, or at least need the non-judgment. They need someone to hold the safe space for them. And so I said, okay, that's the difference. Not so much that I hate people, but I hate that cruelty. I hate that indifference. But if I can make a difference and be a lighthouse for people, then that would be the better service. And then, of course, Spirit pretty much pushed on me and said, you need to be a grief counselor. And after that short discussion, I said, okay, yes, boss.
I have learned to not argue.
Right? Yeah, because when Spirit tells you to do something, you do it.
Yeah. Well,
I hope that answered your question. I just kind of
no, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Because when you're sharing, you're sharing the feeling of purity of the journey, and in these conversations, that's why I didn't want it to be like interview. I just wanted to talk about stuff that we both know that doesn't get drawn out all the time, and lots of people know, but it doesn't get drawn out all the time, and it's hard for a lot of people to talk about in everyday life, and so it becomes a mystery and a frustration. And my suggestion and offering and invitation is to explore what feels real and true to you. And the animal kingdom, in their beingness and their presence, are in that beingness all the time. So let's play with not complicating it too much for a bit. And what if we let it be as simple as the animals, their first communication is, here's how it feels to be me.
Yep.
And that's it. And what if it's that simple? And then, of course, because we have this cognitive ability, we can color it with other concepts and associations and meanings. But if we always start with, here's how it feels, and we start receiving the animals. Do you like my friend back here? We start receiving.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that picture back there.
On a level that they're communicating how life feels to them. It opens our capacity and willingness to feel. And that's where compassion can happen. That's where compassion lives. Right?
And the big thing also, one of the things that I've heard time and time again from the animals for their people, is they want them to have fun, and have fun like they do. You know, have fun like
Yes.
they do in this world. Because people don't, I feel like people have begun to lose the ability to just have a natural fun, whatever, what I call lifts their spark, you know, whatever brings them joy. And people, we need to do that more, I think, to, you know, to get back, because that's a big thing that the animals have been, you know, teaching me and teaching people. And I know I'm not the first one to say this, but the big message is, you know, have fun, you know, have fun like we do. So yeah, so to your point of, you know, experiencing life and what life is like to be them, it's like, okay, you know, yeah, let's just have that, you know, have that moment where you're just sitting, being at peace, and just having that lovely ebb and flow, you know, of energy. And what is it like to be you? And let's, you know, let's have fun. You know,
I
let's
love
have
it.
fun, and let's pay attention to this fun, you know, without complicating it, just enjoying it for what it is.
I love
And
it.
starting from there, yeah.
Bernie was with me for 14 years, and he was a shepherd hound, amazing, like best dog ever. I don't care what anybody says. It was Bernie. Bernie's the best dog, right? He basically parented me through my 20s, and when it was clear that he was on his way out, like the body just wasn't going to be serving him anymore, right? Um, I asked him, you know, I had asked this question so many times on behalf of others, and I finally asked it for myself. Like, before you go, what do you want me to get? What is it you've been trying to tell me that I haven't gotten yet? And it was very, very simple. It was literally, you know, like you say, the horse came over here. Bernie just came right in here, his whole presence, and completely embraced me, and said, see yourself the way I see you. That was the whole thing. And I'm so grateful that I was relaxed enough to get it, to hear it, to really
Mm-hmm.
receive it, because it was also at a time where things were very tumultuous in my
Yeah.
own life. And that that is a gift that never ends. And it's
Yeah.
a gift that only expands into how I can be with others. And like you're saying, you know, when people get ourselves all busy and complicated, the animals are still demonstrating that lots of weird things can be happening, but you know what? It still feels good to roll in the grass. And
Mm-hmm.
it
Yes.
basically changes everything to roll in
Mm-hmm.
the grass.
Roll in the grass, get your feet in the mud. Yep. Playing dirt. Yes.
Exactly. Get dirty and then laugh about it, you
Yes.
know? And it's just true. And the willingness to see that perspective and to feel, to experience that perspective, it takes us beyond that band of consciousness where all the judgment happens. And
Mm-hmm.
it literally, it feels different in your body, doesn't it? It's a different felt experience when you're operating beyond judgment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a wonderful experience, and especially when you can just let go.
Hmm.
You know, when you can just let go of that, when you can enjoy, you know, like digging in the dirt and just for me, digging in the dirt and smelling the dirt and smelling the earth and having it on my hands just feels wonderful.
Hmm.
And I know, you know, my dog enjoys it too when I watch him, roll on the grass and just, scratch his back, and it's just the most, and it's the cutest thing ever, and it's the most joyful thing. Um, just like, when I see my horse and he wants to roll, or he just has this little squeal and he takes off on a little canter, in his pasture, there's just that joy. And I always look at my horse and I say, I'm working on being that person that you need me to be.
Mm.
That I know that I know what he sees, and I know that I need to work on getting there, because there's a lot of, peeling off of layers and
Mm.
coming back to true, and just being, having fun and still being solid, and still being grounded, and just all of that.
Yeah, I think there's this mental interpretation that if we let go, as you say, like, am I still even going to exist? What does let go mean? And
Mm-hmm.
that's just the ego and the insecurity. But that,
Sure.
let's honor that, right? Because it's there. It doesn't need to be macheted out of existence.
Right.
And in fact, will quiet itself right down once it knows it's not the bad guy. You'd go, well, of course you're afraid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where animals are so wonderful for people. Animals don't bring machetes to our ego. Well, sometimes in a way they do, but they but they're not attacking for the sake of attacking. They are, if it feels like an animal's pushing on our ego, it's very much because behind the behavior is a knowing that that's not who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
So let's push this to a head so you can see your choice to look at it, and
right.
either fight to keep it or let go and experience yourself the way we see you.
Right. And letting go, it's not an all or nothing thing. Again, I think, we're back at that, the whole binary, it either is or isn't,
right.
kind of thing.
Back
and
to
it's
harmony. Yeah.
Right. and you can still do that. You can still let go without losing yourself. And I feel like a lot of people don't quite get that, because animals will do like, and also along this path, there are some animals that come into people's lives that are unlike anything they've ever experienced, and they are there specifically to shake things up, to absolutely shake things up and to cause a difference and to help bring them out of whatever funk, whatever rut these people have been in. And so now it's time for this animal to help bring them out of it. Right. I know that's what, our own dog, that's what Rocky's done, and that's what he continues to do for us. Yeah. So.
It's so great. And it's all a conversation from the heart toward the heart. And when we let ourselves, like we were saying before, come back to that simplicity, the heart space is the place that doesn't operate in judgment, that is common to all of life. It is that the place where harmony is already existing.
Yep.
And you said something, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it made me want to come back to that point, that we don't have to try to achieve harmony. You can work that way and, work toward it, or you can let yourself come to recognize where it already exists, just like your ability to communicate. Mm-hmm. Recognize that feeling, the fact that you can shift your perspective, tune your awareness, and become aware of the presence of harmony. You can mm-hmm. feel love. That's another way of saying it. The presence of harmony, you can feel love. You don't have anything to chase. Reorganize your awareness and let yourself become aware of where it already exists, and it will only expand. And I think that's just one of the greatest gifts that the animal kingdom is to humanity and to life in general, is that.
Oh, absolutely.
Presence.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I am now aware of the time. Is there anything else that you would like to say or add before we wrap up? I'm so grateful for the conversation and your beautiful awareness and your ability to articulate your awareness. It's really special, and I so appreciate you sharing all of that.
Thank you. And saying, I feel like our conversation's just gotten started, and that we could just talk forever, because I know I could talk forever about this too, and just go on with so many different levels and so many different layers and prongs and branches and things like that. So, but thank you for having this podcast to allow and have the space for these conversations. Because I think it's also an important thing for people to take a break and listen to and think about. So so thank you for that. Wow, anything else to add? I don't think so. I just I've always I always have the mission of for people and I always want people to be able to listen. I think somewhere out there's the quote that the animal kingdom is always communicating with us if we're just willing to be quiet enough to listen. Mm-hmm. And that goes for people too, because people are animals too. We're full, everybody's full spectrum emotional beings, and if we could just be quiet enough to listen to each other and listen from that place of of the heart, not just what's all going on up here, but what's truly going on, and listen, then I feel that we would be further along, or have just a create a better space for for all of us too.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. That's a whole other conversation too. Listening, I think, is one of, if not my very favorite thing on the planet, because that's where healing and regeneration can happen. That's what lets us express ourselves, is when there is a listening that beckons us forward. And so yeah, yes to all of that, yes, and more. Holly, thank you so very much. I'll look forward to doing this again together, because I think, as you said, there are so many facets, and at different times, different facets are going to speak to people in different ways. So, so again, thank you for your levels of mastery, for sharing, for assisting, and having the courage to walk toward compassion for yourself and humanity, side by side with the animal kingdom. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I look at you with an open heart and see who you really are. No need to find the words for this faith and grace, but don't doubt it, trust the smile on my face. You come to me as a kindred soul who's never been alone. Through dark, uncertain days when you were asking why, I have been the light on the other side. There's a way to live this life, to stop doing and start being, and understand the meaning of the wonder all around. With your spirit in the air and your feet on the ground, the smallest step on the hardest road will lead you where you're meant to go. Surrender to this moment and let yourself be free. The truth is that your story starts